Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are with Mindy, and she is the founder and Chief of Inspiration Officer at Inspiring HR. Mindy, tell us a little about yourself and the company.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I was looking forward to this afternoon. My name is Mindy Flanigan. I am the founder and chief inspiration officer for Inspiring HR. We provide HR consulting services to small businesses with typically less than 50 employees who don't have a need for an internal full-time person to be on their payroll, but they have people partaking in HR policy and practice inside their company, and they don't have any idea what they're doing because they've never been trained. So
Hmm.
we work with those people to get their people ops infrastructure set and working properly, both in form of best practices, but also compliantly with state labor law expectations so you can minimize risk.
Interesting. I mean, I could imagine how hard it would be to have HR responsibilities with never being in an HR position.
Well, you
Uh,
don't even need us anymore. Apparently AI is gonna no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
no, 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 no. I think there's always going to have to be a human on loop there. Tell us about your
I
customers.
encourage Gen Z to keep pushing back on AI because I love me some AI to make my emails sound simpler, but I'm not trusting AI to write my employee handbook. So I'll just leave it
100%.
at that. Yeah.
I think that AI is a tool just like a hammer, right? It makes us do work better and faster. But tell us a little bit more about the people that you actually serve in your customers.
So, I learned a long time ago with business networking that if you want referrals and you want people to remember who you are, don't say we work with anyone.
Mm.
But for the most part, if you look at our current client base, we work with a variety of different types of businesses that are generally have less than 50 employees. Our average employee count over the swath of clients we have is 28 employees. But what's gotten interesting, particularly from COVID times to present, is the increased leveraging of remote works and small businesses having an employee presence in multiple states.
Mhm.
And that gets really tricky to stay on top of, particularly if you are a company that has an employee presence in states that we would regard as medium to high complex. High complex, for example, would be California and New York. A lot of great talent in California and New York, but those states are really tricky to get in line with in terms of compliance obligations and very fluid. Their labor laws change a lot. So we work with businesses. Someone's tasked internally with making sure your people ops infrastructure stays current. But if you don't have any experience in HR, you don't know where to start. And you don't necessarily want keep my handbook current on my annual to-do list. So that's where it's this nice support relationship with four targets for us. What we affectionately call the office admin catch-all. That's usually an office manager who doubles and triples in all sorts of things. A VP of ops or an operations manager, or usually somebody in the finance department, and that's sometimes the VP of finance or the controller. The other, so that's four: office admin catch-all, someone in the finance department, or somebody that's, second to the business owner, usually a VP of ops or a COO. Beyond that, because of various state law complexity, it actually isn't uncommon that we work with an HR department of one. You will normally find an HR department of one for businesses that hover around 50 employees, but they're high turnover. And so that HR department of one spends about 50% of their time recruiting, which only leaves 50% of the time to keep current with their people ops infrastructure, and they are stretched too thin. Plus, it's lonely being an HR department of one. If you have a really tricky employee relations situation pop up, and you don't have any experience in it, yeah, we got AI and you can do searching, but sometimes it's nice to collaborate with another HR colleague that might have expertise in solving that tricky situation. And so we help an HR department of one add capacity without adding another body to payroll.
So I'm interested to know, what does it look like when a potential customer comes to you guys? What are some like signals of that they're struggling, that they're in pain, and like what does their day to day look like before and after working with you guys?
So we have four key areas that we have now focused on, four industry types. Okay. We work really well with nonprofits. So I'll speak to that first. It's either the executive director says we have to get our people ops infrastructure in order, or somebody on the board of directors has brought in a new executive director that says, there's not even a handbook. You got to fix the people ops piece of this particular nonprofit. So that's usually the lingering pain. Either the executive director just can't take that mishmash of lack of infrastructure to bed with them every night, or the board has directed the executive director to fix the people ops mess. So that's an example in the nonprofit community. We also work with a lot in the healthcare space, particularly with behavioral health. And in the state of Virginia, they have stricter laws than the federal government when it comes to who's a contractor versus an employee. So for a lot of behavioral health practices in particular, they may say, I don't even know how to do this. I don't even know how to go from paying a contractor $100 an hour to putting them on payroll for XYZ salary. What does that look like? And then what is my people ops infrastructure to support that? So those would be examples of where people would actually have real business pain points where they don't know what they don't know. They're
Hmm.
not comfortable with their current circumstances. And so they seek guidance from us on an ongoing basis to make their people ops or their people ops better, or at least put something in place that they can continue to fine tune and puts them in a more informed position to grow, to scale, so to speak.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then when do you typically see that a small business outgrows the wing it phase? Because I can imagine, a small company of like 8 people,
10.
they're
Ten's the
right of
number.
10.
It's 10.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
would say 10 is when they need to stop winging it with, hiring a few people
It's the
here
most
and
common
and
pain
go
point.
neat.
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of businesses that are less than 10 that just aren't comfortable with the risk. So they ask for help early. I mean, and quite honestly, we have some startups that have gotten venture capital money, and part of their funding is contingent on you can't hire friends and family. You got to invest in your people ops right out of the gate so that we know our money is safe when you go to hire people. But more times than not, if it's the traditional entrepreneur, hired everybody, we had a good marketing plan, we grew, you get to about 10 employees and you realize your risk has expanded to a point and you want to level up, so to speak, be a little bit more credible as a business owner that says, how do I thread this needle properly between what I think HR is, which is this corporate layered complex nightmare, to where I have some people ops sophistication, but you have to make sure that you bring in that people ops infrastructure in a way that is true to your culture and not so rigid that you're stifling creativity. Because you normally have employed quite a few people that are innovative and entrepreneurial. And if you go too far with corporate HR red tape, you're going to stifle that culture pretty quickly. So I think there's always that fear of a business owner who admits they need the people ops infrastructure, but they want to make sure they make the right choice and what path to take so they
Hmm.
don't damage the culture they've successfully built going forward. Does that make
I
sense?
see. Yeah, no, that makes
Yeah.
total sense.
I mean, there are a lot of people that still have a lot of PTSD over what they think HR was from the 1980s in corporate America. And I
Huh?
will admit there are some that are still in the HR space that make things way too complicated
Yeah.
and are not comfortable with the gray area judgment calls, but it's one of the reasons one of our core values is simplify. I mean, if
Yeah.
we all followed the labor laws that come out of our legislature, no one would be in compliance because lawyers write these things and nobody understands what that actual piece of legislation says. So
Hmm.
part of what we do is, we take what this new state law is, and then we tell everybody what the reality is and how they honor that obligation in policy and practice in plain English. No legalese if we can possibly help it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So, there's a little bit of a stigma when it comes to HR. As someone that's not in the exact space that you are in, or nowhere near a professional as yourself, of I seen a story about a company that fired some of their HR staff and said that the HR staff made more problems than they actually
Well,
did
it's true.
solve them.
It
So
makes
what's
for a
like
really funny movie sometimes, but yeah, it's kind of true. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm guessing you guys probably do a lot of education when it comes to how to properly run an HR department and the role that HR plays into a company and its growth. What
Mhm.
does that kind of look like? Because especially when you have a business like yourself, right? You guys do HR outsourcing. Is it ever hard to show the value in what exactly you guys do?
It's hard only up to the point that you haven't been successful in convincing the people you're talking to that you actually are a business professional that are good at HR, not
Hmm.
an HR person who has limited business experience. There's a difference, right? So for me, my journey has always been one of transparency with people on my team. Whether I worked inside the PEO industry for a while, ran a benefits department, and
Hmm.
before I started Inspiring HR in 2007. I remember even at a rather young age for leadership, everyone complained about this benefits department. They don't play nice with the salespeople. Their customer service is terrible with clients. There's high turnover. And I got into that department as one of my first big leadership type promotions. And I thought, well, I think everyone here is perfectly lovely. What are we missing here? And I realized something key. They didn't have context around their role. They had
Hmm.
been working for this PEO for years, and not a one of them understood how salespeople brought in new clients or how the PEO actually priced their services and made money. So I think when it comes to HR people that understand standard policy and practice, if you don't have an understanding about how the business actually operates in terms of money coming in, how money is spent, how profits are distributed, and how everyone's roles tie into that day-to-day functioning of the business, you're going to lose your audience. Because no, I mean, I will admit early on, I used to, when I first started Inspiring HR, I thought the fastest path to getting new clients was to scare the life out of them that they were going to get audited by the Department of Labor. It's actually really low risk. And that's not inspiring anyway. Fear selling is not inspiring. What is inspiring for us is being able to articulate the value of structure, putting some structure around your people ops for a
Hmm.
business owner who really is interested in building a company that's profitable and also a great place to work. Because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, people stay because of culture, culture, culture. And so, yeah,
100%.
we weave labor law compliance into that, but our greatest joy is making sure you put the right people in the right seats in a great culture so that everybody wins.
100%. Now, I mean, running your own firm, it means that you do for yourself, like you eat what you sow. You do for yourself what you do for your clients,
Hmm.
right?
True.
Hiring, culture, even hard conversations. What's a people
Which are
decision
no
in your
fun, by the way. If anybody thinks I have any pleasure in having hard conversations, you'd be wrong. So, one of our core values is relate. And the reason one of our core values is relate is I have the honor of having great people on our team, but everybody needs coaching, including me, by the way. I don't know everything. That's why we're a manage up environment. But when I have to have a hard conversation, I have the butterflies in the stomach just like everybody else. And I have been doing this since 1993, and it doesn't get easier. It's just a part of leadership. So,
I
but
I
yeah.
think that that'll help out a lot of people because even me sometimes with hard conversations, they never get easier. They
And you
never
also
do.
practice them repeatedly in the mirror before you do them. And what happens? At the end of the conversation, you're like, that didn't go at all the way I planned it to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
There's no there's I guess the only thing that would get you better at those is repetition.
true.
Now, with those hard conversations, let's talk about more about hard conversations. With those hard conversations, it's said that some people they move a lot slower in life because they're scared to have those hard conversations. You have a lot of hard conversations in the HR space there. Would you kind of agree with that statement? How many times does a someone that's you come into a business and you see that the VP of operations or the founder is running, HR part-time
Hmm.
and there's a couple hard conversations they have to make, but they haven't made them because they feel like they're too busy and they're too worried or they're too scared. You kinda run into that?
That's just honestly, I'm too busy is just an excuse. It's they don't want to have the conversation. And they
Mhm,
haven't found the words. They haven't found the words. They haven't found the support. Or, as much as people are telling them they need to have the conversation, they don't see the problem is as big as the people who have brought it to them. So, or they're not sharing another dynamic or another layer to the situation that people aren't seeing. Like for instance, there's plenty of business owners that they have the context of why they hired that person in the first place, but then they delegated them out to somebody else, and all the somebody else knows is that this person's a problem. They don't
mhm,
know. No one's a mind reader, right? So while the business owner
mhm,
may have seen wonderful potential and opportunity for coachability and say a challenging employee, if you delegate them out to somebody else to lead and manage and you don't tell that person the history, the context, what you saw in them at the time you interviewed them, well, then you're leaving them only half equipped to be successful in managing that relationship. So,
mhm.
It it
Interesting.
it's a challenge for sure.
Uh-huh.
But I've even had to remind myself when it comes to the hard conversations, and there's a lot of gray area judgment calls in this. I mean, we follow EOS. I don't know if you're familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneur's Operating System. I love it on so many levels. And EOS prescribes the right people in the right seats, right? Sounds awesome. But people are more complicated than that, right? There are nuanced instances where you might have a manager that says, "I'm out of patience. I've had it with this employee. I can't put up with their lack of dependability." But you might not know the whole story. You don't know for sure that that employee hasn't gone to HR or someone else they trust to tell them about a really challenging personal circumstance that they don't want everybody to know about. So it's difficult with people. I mean, you've got to ask instead of assume before you think an employment relationship really can't be salvaged.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I will concede, sometimes you just run out of patience with people when you invest
Yeah.
and you invest and you invest and they don't reciprocate. And despite your best efforts, they still won't meet you halfway to go on that journey with you to get better.
Mhm.
It's time to part ways, and that in itself is a difficult conversation, particularly if you think it's going to get risky. So,
Mhm.
as much as I'd love to say hire fast and fire fast, as Gary V prescribes, I wish it were that simple all the time. It's not. But when it's not simple, it's easy to make excuses on why you don't want to have these conversations in the first place.
Mhm. How many fires, if you had to put out some fires, how many fires have you had to put out? Or how many fires were in a company that they didn't even notice or they didn't see?
Since 2007 or in the last week?
Well, we'll go your most notable ones.
Good. So it's interesting. You say fires, and the fires could be. See, I see the fires as the really extremes, right? Like I tell my whole team because we are really great. It's an overused term. I know it's an overused term, but I don't have a better term for it. We are great at work-life balance around here. So part of our slogan and what we tell the world we do, but also apply it to ourselves to the point you made, you probably practice what you preach, and we do, is we believe in HR done differently. Now, that could mean different things to different people. But part of how we internally demonstrate HR done differently is 30 hours a week is full time around here, not the traditional
Mm,
40. Sometime back in 1938, someone decided the 40-hour work week was the gold standard for paying a salary, and we just don't buy it around here. I think 30-hour, as long as you are dedicated and focused and productive for 30
yeah.
hours, I promise you that is the equivalent of probably 55 hours in the office, because that's how much time can get wasted in the office.
Mhm.
Um, but in terms of firefighting, I often tell everyone no one's transplanting organs around here. If you've worked a full week, there's no reason you're not away from your desk by 3 o'clock on Friday. Just pay attention to your emails and honor our return of call guarantee.
Mhm.
On occasion, we will hear from somebody at 5 o'clock on a Friday, unfortunately. And the fire is we just found out that our controller has embezzled $1 million out of our checking account. Like, so that, to me, that's a fire. Like,
Mhm.
first of all, you have somebody who has committed a crime or you suspect has committed a crime. You have to
Mhm.
cut them off from accessing all of your stuff and either fire them immediately or at least suspend them and investigate. And it's a lot of risk to navigate all at once.
Yeah.
How many of those have I handled since 2007 as a consultant or somebody who owns a consulting practice and I've seen it come through? I don't know. Probably 30 times, something of
Oof.
that level, a true fire. So it's really not that much. But
Mhm.
everyone's definition of fire is different, right? We've had plenty of times where people think it's a fire at 3 o'clock and they're like, this is nothing you need to act on now. We can figure this out on Monday morning. There is no lingering risk that requires action this minute because sometimes people are emotional and what they think is a fire means they're in agony and they want it out of their head. But that doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily mean, that doesn't mean it's a fire. And it also means you don't actually have to act this minute. Because sometimes if you act this minute, you make an emotional decision instead of a rational decision. And so we're here to help them navigate those emotions when you have to make a judgment call on what to do about what you perceive to be an employee fire. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I'm just thinking back to it would be very hard for a founder-led organization or a VP of operations to be able to navigate that exact situation.
Yeah.
So I think
Maybe can
that
you imagine if somebody on the outs so imagine if your business banker calls and says, "When's the last time you guys looked at your checking account? Like, we see this series of large sweeps out of here for the last 6 months, and your reconciliation is off by $1,000,000, and we suspect it's your controller who you have given no oversight to." Like, I'm just, like, thinking through in my head, I'm like, "That is an alarming call. That is an
mhm,
alarming call." And understanding how to navigate that and still operate within what labor laws expect of you in that situation, let alone do I call the cops or not,
mhm.
is tricky. Yeah,
Yeah, very,
yeah.
very. You know, when a business buys any outsourced service, right? The end goal is this outsourced service would help me either grow my company, and then that even means just make me more money, right? What is that invisible ROI? Because sometimes, with a service, the service helps something, and that something helps something, and that something helps them make more money. So what is that like invisible ROI that you guys give small businesses?
So it could be one of 2 things, and it depends on the business. It can be the primary 2 things I think of, and it really depends on the business owner themselves. We deal with some business owners who, over the weekend, when they get up on a Saturday and they're trying to give themselves a mental break and distance themselves from their business just for one day, which is not so easy when you're a small business owner. You're passionate about your small business. This is like another one of your kids. It's really hard to distance yourself. But every once in a while, you have these moments where you're like, I have to feel like something is settled, something is figured out. You want to feel better about your baby. You want to feel like you're doing what you can to mature your baby. And so sometimes looking in the mirror, knowing that somebody is on top of figuring out and maturing your people ops infrastructure just makes you feel better about your baby. It makes you feel like a more informed. It has a lot to do with feeling, right? Somebody's on top of this. Somebody's taking care of making sure that our people ops infrastructure is in order, with or without the right resources. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we have a loved office admin catch-all who, for a while, was sort of just Googling what to do in one-off situations. Now you've got them paired with somebody who actually has helped them not only create a handbook, but understand what's in it. So it actually becomes a tool and not a document that just new employees sign and never look at again. So
Mhm,
that's one business owner, it's a feeling. But here's what's interesting with the second type of business owner that's primary for us. If you really think you're going to sell in, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years, and your entire path is adding more and more value inside the business to get an attractive sales price. If you were somebody that was going to buy an entire company, including the employee assets, what will you write a bigger check for? The business that has some structure in place and runs smoothly, or the business that has employee management chaos?
mhm,
Which one would you write a bigger check for? And we have a lot of business owners that say, I am going to get 2 times more than I thought if I can figure out this people ops part of my business.
mhm,
So, yeah. So it's either feelings or money, or maybe a little bit of both.
mhm. I love it, I love it. It's
Yeah.
all in the exit, right? It's all in the
Yeah.
exit.
Yeah.
Now, you've talked about, I've seen parallels between sports and business success,
I love
right?
sports.
Yeah, I say you're a Syracuse
You're
fan.
talking to the right person. Yeah, you can see that. Yes, I am born and raised in Syracuse, New York. I did not go there, but my grandfather was the dean of the forestry college, and so we had the luxury of alumni seats for football and basketball games. So
That's awesome.
I bleed Syracuse orange.
That's awesome. Well, I gotta say, well, you're probably around the age where you remember Carmelo Anthony then.
Yes, I was pregnant with my daughter, their first championship. I let me tell you something. Mello's on TV, and I am stopping and watching. Love that man.
I love it, I love it.
And I think it's awesome that his son is now being coached by Jerry McNamara, who he
Mhm.
won the national championship with. So it's just poetic. I can't wait for this next basketball season, quite honestly.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be exciting. I think he's really
yeah,
good.
yeah.
But sports and business success, right? I feel like sometimes they can be a parallel in like mentality and being able to lead. Has that you being in the sports world and being a huge sports fan, has that generally changed maybe how you lead or you build a team or something to do with culture?
It makes me competitive, for sure. But I think healthy competitive, because I really do try for win-wins as much as possible. I hope what I believe to be true of myself is true in terms of how I lead the company. We're still dealing with business owners who they worked for people. that ruled with an iron fist, or somewhere we're in that mentality of you're lucky you even have a job. That's just not a modern day workplace any longer. So I'd like to believe I have, like any maturing sports team and getting the right leaders in the right seats, I'd like to believe that, even if you look at like Bob Knight with the Indiana Hoosiers, right? I'm sure he ruled with an iron fist, or at least that's how he was portrayed. I don't know if Jerry McNamara on Syracuse is ruling with an iron fist. He's more about rallying the troops, common causes. And I'm not saying it's all kumbaya, but
Mhm.
we really have pivoted overall, I think, in most modern day workplaces from do as I say, not as I do. I treat everybody like a kid. You're lucky to have a job here, to be an adult, show up as an adult, keep everybody rowing in the same direction, rally people around a common cause. That's not necessarily how workplaces were 30 or 40 years ago. So I think as we've watched sports and coaching styles mature, I think we've also seen the modern day workplace and how people like to lead mature. And some of it's generational too. I mean, I'm sure Gen Z has a lot to say about how they want to run workplaces 10 or 15 years from now. And I'm not
100%.
even sure. And I'd love to know, I'd love for just a fortune teller to tell me in 10 to 15 years, will have Gen Z been able to tame AI, or is it really just going to take over the world? We'll see what
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
We'll see. Time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah.
Now, the kind of closes off here. For the owner listening who knows their HR is held together with duct tape, but keeps putting it off, what's the one first step you tell them to take this week?
If you can I do 2? If you aren't outsourcing payroll, I strongly recommend you do that. And it's interesting, payroll is adjacent to HR, but again, back to my original point, if you're not getting the paychecks right, no one cares about any of the other HR type things you might want to do. See, but if you make that make a wise payroll outsourcing decision, you're going to have in front of you some HR support resources and preferably some decent technology that can then be paired with maturing your people ops infrastructure. So after you've figured out what you're doing with payroll, the next decision is what part of your people ops infrastructure is your biggest priority. And you might not want it to be a handbook, but I promise you it's probably a handbook. I wish I could retitle the handbook something else. I don't know what I'd call it, but it really is, in our experience, settling on what goes in the handbook is central to you making some core decisions about who you want to be as a company and what you
Mhm.
want your long-term culture to be like. Because the handbook really sits at the heart of what you tell new employees about your brand, your vision, your mission, your values. It's also a tool for your frontline managers in terms of the guardrails in the organization, coaching, accountability, performance management. All of this gets baked into what you decide you want that handbook to look like. So that's where you start.
Awesome. Well, Mindy, if the audience wants to see more about you guys or see where Inspiring HR is, where can they find you?
InspiringHR.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter. You can read our blogs. You can go to any of our sub pages and see a description of the types of business that we work with. What I'm really loving lately is that we have a YouTube channel that we're continuing to add content to. We call it a series called Uncomplicating HR, where it's me getting to showcase the great talent on our team. You can find me on LinkedIn and send me a message, or follow our company page on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, there you guys go. There is Mindy. And Mindy, I thank you for coming on and talking about HR.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And thank you for finding me on LinkedIn. There's our LinkedIn shout out for the day.
Of course. All right.
Okay.
See you guys in the next episode.